I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is a budget hearing. It is 6 o'clock on May 14th. If you could all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight we're here for the budget presentation, and then we will also have some community participation. So at this time, I would like to turn the meeting over to Matt.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Crum, the business manager here at HCS. We have our text set up for the candidate session that will follow at 7. So I'm going to move around a little bit. I'll try to project as best as I can without a microphone. So if you can't hear me, just give me a hand sign. I'll try to pick it up a little bit. So thank you for being here. This is the last of our required public meetings that we have to have in New York State in advance of our statewide budget vote and board election that will take place next Tuesday on the 21st. The budget was adopted in April by the board after a series of public meetings, a series of internal discussions that took place over the course of months. Most of this, if you've been to any of our if you've attended any of our previous public meetings, a lot of this is going to be a review. But I think it's important to go through this again, especially with uncertainty as we move forward, not only for the 24-25 budget, but the effects that it's going to have on subsequent budgets moving forward. The major factors that influence our budget development every year, but especially this year, are represented in this graphic, the 5 green clouds. It really is a balancing act. And we have so many outside factors and internal factors that we have to consider. This year, these 5 specifically, first and foremost, in the middle is the changes in student needs. You're going to talk about that more specifically in a moment. We have contractual obligations that is our main cost driver. 75% or so of our budget is personnel in our people. The New York State budget and the challenges associated with that in the form of state aid and our inability to generate revenue through foundation aid that we have come to count on. We'll talk about that a little bit. Our ability to raise revenue through taxes. And you see I put question marks there after our limited taxing authority. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, which is sort of unique to this year, is the expiration of some grant funding that we had coming out of the pandemic. The changes in student needs. Fortunately for us, our overall enrollment the last 10 years or so has been relatively stable, especially compared to other school districts in this region. Bill and I heard a statistic in the fall that I think something like 92% of districts in New York State either had stagnant or declining enrollment. So very limited number of school districts that are seeing an increase in their enrollment. What we've seen is a big change in our student needs. So while our enrollment has remained constant, the needs of those students has changed significantly. Special education is becoming more and more expensive and eating up a larger amount of our annual budget. We currently have 169 students that either have an individualized education plan or 504 plan as determined by our Committee on Special Education. It's roughly 30%. That's the highest that it's ever been, a wide range of student needs. We also anticipate next year, as a result of the annual meetings through the CSE, 11 students that will be placed in out-of-district placements. In other words, their day-to-day educational program will not be here at HCS. They'll be placed in an alternative program. We currently have 6. 5 of those 11 are new students that are currently enrolled at HCS that will be going to a placement outside of the district. And you'll see the dollar amount there in parentheses. But for those 11 students, the cost of the tuition for those students to attend elsewhere is very significant. Career and technical education. We currently have 35 high school students, primarily juniors and seniors. We do have a handful of sophomores that are enrolled as well, that are taking career and technical education at Madison and Ida both. The total price tag for that's about $350,000. As recently as 5 years ago, we had less than 20 students. So again, these are great programs. These are programs that our students want. But with that comes the challenges of balancing and educating our students here at HCS, as well as providing the opportunities for those kids to go elsewhere. Despite that, we've been able to maintain a lot of our programming here at HCS. We currently offer 8 advanced placement courses in the high school. So despite more kids not being educated here at HCS, we continue to offer programs here that frankly we don't see in neighboring districts, certainly not of our size in this region. So we've actually, in the last 10 years, we've increased the number of AP courses that we offer from 5 to 8, and the number of students enrolled in those AP classes is almost double. So if you think about this in terms of both ends of the spectrum, we have needs on both ends of the spectrum for our students, and it's a continuing challenge to try to meet the needs of all those students. We have 39 electives in the middle school, high school. So we've been able to retain most of what has made HCS so great over the years. As I said before, the lion's share of our budget is tied up in personnel, salaries and benefits of all of our employees. Minimum wage increases has had an impact on the budget the last couple of years, will continue to do so. Contractual wage increases for all of our employees. Employee benefits continues to rise, costs continue to escalate, both health insurance, retirement contributions to the state retirement. As an employer, we have to contribute to those systems. So you can see roughly about $11 million of our over $15 million budget is tied up in personnel. Talk a little bit about the state budget. The state budget process really starts in January when the governor releases an executive proposal. The details of that budget contains individual state aid runs for individual school districts in the state. As has been the case in recent years, the governor has not been real generous with regard to increases for education funding. When that proposal came out in January, HCS was to see a reduction of around $37,000 or 1% in our New York State foundation. In the current year, we're receiving $3.75 million. Yes, $3.75 million in foundation. In the past few years, what's happened is the governor proposes a freeze or a reduction, and then ultimately in the adopted legislative budget, there's a hold harmless provision which says that schools can't receive any less than what they received the prior year, and then there's a minimum aid increase for all schools moving forward. So that's been 3% in the last few years. Unfortunately, it wasn't so favorable this year. The formula that's used for foundation aid in New York State dates back to 2007. Okay? Based on that formula, HCS has been, quote unquote, overfunded since 08-09. So the amount of foundation aid that we've been getting since 08-09 is more than what the formula says we should get. And that's the case for probably 40% of the districts in New York State. So that formula in 2007, which uses wealth measures from the 2000 census, a whole litany of different metrics, it hasn't been updated. It's been tweaked on an annual basis, and districts have been getting increases or held harmless through the adopted budget each year. And every year what happens is there's advocacy efforts made, the Senate, the Assembly, the governor, they're duking it out over the annual budget. Nobody looks at the formula, and then we start over again the next year. We're right back to where we were. In this year's adopted budget, there is a committee that's been formed that's supposed to look at this formula. So good news is, there might be a change coming to the formula. Bad news is there's some uncertainty to that, and we don't know how that's going to shape out for all school districts. So ultimately what happened was, throughout this budget process, we were banking out a 3% increase in our foundation, which is about $112,000. The state budget was not on time. For years, there was an on-time state budget on or around April 1st. This year, it was not. It went deep into the third week of April, which was after school districts were adopting the budget. Our timeline doesn't change. We still have to vote on May 21st, and we have certain deadlines working back off that date. So the bad news for us is we're basically starting out the year next year at about $112,000 deficit than what we had anticipated, based on there not being any, excuse my pointer, minimum increase for 24-25 that we've seen in prior years. Now, what did that mean? The budget had been adopted. We find out next year we're not going to get $100,000 that we thought we were going to get. Talk a little bit about that in a minute. What we've decided is, rather than re-examine programming and either cut program or make changes in personnel, we're going to continue on with the adopted budget, and we have a potential for some other revenue sources. So the biggest question is there's so much uncertainty moving forward with state aid. Most concerning for us, I'm going to skip ahead. Over the years, while we've remained relatively steady with our enrollment, we've seen huge increases in our wealth. Okay? There are two primary measures of wealth for school districts in New York State: income wealth and property wealth. The property wealth for HDS has gone up exponentially over the years. Those measures are on a per pupil basis. So, residents of this community, you know what's happening with assessments, you know what's happening with real estate markets. This has an impact on HCS. Right? As a general rule, a general principle, the wealthier you are, the less assistance you get from New York State. The way it is. We know, regardless of what happens with the formula, if there are changes moving forward, we could be at a disadvantage because of that problem for pupils. We have some concerning enrollment trends, which we'll talk about in a minute. So, as property values continue to go up, our enrollment continues to drop, which we anticipate it will in coming years based on some enrollment trends. That could be concerning for us. We also have a tax cap. It's not a 2% tax cap. Politicians would love to throw out that 2%. 2% is the baseline number, and then district-specific calculations to arrive at your final number. In our case this year, our allowable tax levy increase under the tax cap is 4%. The budget that's been adopted and is up for vote is tax cap compliant. Can you override the tax cap? Yes, you can. There's strings attached. You have to pass that with a supermajority vote, 60% or more. If it doesn't pass, and you have to go to contingency budget, if the results could be dire. You go back to the 0%. The expiration of grant funding. So in March of 2020, I'm sorry, it was during 21, but retroactively back to March 2020, when the pandemic began. The district was recipient of $1.1 million in COVID relief funds. And the purpose of those funds were to supplement, not supplant, but to supplement and add program, add staffing for the return to in-person instruction. Some districts applied those funds to face masks that they bought in September of 2020. Some districts use them to buy Clorox machines that they could spray down their buses with it. We did not. We invested that money in personnel and programs for direct services for students when we return to in-person learning. Back in 2021, people in my position, Bill's, board members, said, this is great. What's going to happen in 2024 when those funds go away? Figure it out. Here we are. For us, we were able to spread those funds out, so it's not a $1.1 million clip, but if it's roughly, I'd say, a $400,000 shelf of expiring funds. As a small school district, we do not have a lot of movement in personnel in terms of people leaving the district, people retiring, and the ability to move people around. Larger districts may have retirements. They can absorb hits like this through attrition. You lose somebody, you don't replace them. You reshift duties. You lose somebody, you replace somebody at a lower cost. So the real challenge for us was to assess these positions that were created, that were needed, that are valued. We know they're valued. We heard a lot of feedback. And being creative to absorb those positions into the general fund moving forward for next year. So this is a review. This was really done at our board workshop in April. As we talked about what we were going to be doing next year, what's in, what's out, what was added, what's going away. We talked about the 5 additional students that are going to outside places. Cost of tuition for those 5 students is $285,000. So that's a $285,000 expense that is added to the budget. Now, oftentimes what's misinterpreted through an exercise like this is, well, if it's $285,000 to send these kids elsewhere, well, there's probably $285,000 here that we won't have to spend anything. No, not how it works. That's the way the governor seems to think it works. You have less kids in your seats. You don't need as much money from the state. Not that simple. Okay? Most of the resources that we invested our COVID relief funds in were in our SEL department, social emotional learning. We created, one of the positions that we created is an SEL coordinator. Talked about what kids need. Kids returning to school from the pandemic, we saw needs that we'd never seen before. Not here, in schools all across the country. That's not my area of expertise, but I know that. Bill and our instructional team have communicated that. Parents have communicated that. We created an SEL room. We were able to work with Madison County to bring on board a mental health counselor, which is unique. By being a Madison County employee, they were able to do things that HCS employees cannot, such as go into homes, work after hours. It's proven to have great value for us. So we've been able to retain those positions in the general fund budget for next year. So what's out? How can we add all these things, retain these things, and keep that balance? We do have one retirement of an elementary teacher that won't be replaced. We will not hire someone to replace that retiring teacher. Getting creative, shifting people around. We're able to do that by going from 2 sections of half-day pre-K down to 1 section of half-day pre-K. We hope, and this hasn't been finalized, that half-day section might be expanded a little bit time-wise, might be a little bit longer program. Unfortunately, the main driving force behind that decision was the enrollment trend, which is very concerning. We currently have
20.
for this grade year.
Oh, this year? 19.
19 kids in pre-K. Next year we have 18 enrolled, which is the limit for one section. We have one student on the waiting list, and that student came after the registration period closed. So as of right now, every student that was registered during the open enrollment period has received my food bank. I know there's been concern about that. The bigger concern is the enrollment trend. The fact that we only had 18 kids in pre-K, basically this year and next year, is very concerning, because those cohorts will then go through all the way through school. Behavioral specialists that we've added with COVID funds will not be back next year. Those duties and the programs associated with that position will be absorbed with the other positions that are being retained on the left-hand side. We've had a part-time elementary math support, AIS, that was hired as one of our retired teachers. That position is out. There will be other ways in which math support is provided, primarily that is in the elementary school. We have a high school science position that's vacant through attrition. That's going to be combined with a special education position. Again, this is all tied into the student needs. So where I said $285,000 in tuition to send kids outside placements, that doesn't necessarily mean there's that much expense or it frees up that much in district, but it does free up some. And usually it's in the form of personnel. So there is going to be a combination of those two positions. And then also the reduction of one full-time equivalent in our building and ground position expected for about 6 months or so. So as a summary, if you've got the, if you have the budget newsletter that went out.
Building and grounds.
You said building and grounds.
We did?
Yeah.
Sorry.
15.6 million, thereabouts, a 4.32% increase budget to budget, a 4% tax levy increase, which is tax cap compliant, and is right at our limit for the year. And again, that was starting at 2%, some slight tax-based growth, and the continuing layering in of our local share of our debt service for our capital project and bus purchases. So with all that said, it didn't quite get us to where we needed to be. One of the things that we're doing, well, actually I'm going to skip ahead to the last bullet. So this $112,000 in foundation aid that we didn't end up getting that we were kind of counting. Colgate is a great partner to us. I think everyone knows that. They've given us a voluntary contribution for as long as I know, as long as I've been here. Colgate is very interested in what goes on at HCS for obvious reasons. We are very important to them for their ability to attract young faculty, and similar to us, we understand how important they are to us and what a significant part they are of this community. We are always in conversations with Colgate, always. Not just budget related, whether it's seminar classes that our kids can take, whether it's tutors coming down and getting hours in from the code, whether it's student teacher placements, whether it's facility use, always. Thankfully, Colgate has decided to step up and for the 24-25 school year, voluntarily contribute an extra $65,000. Which is going to go a long way in plugging that deficit, if we will, throughout the budget. So we are very thankful for that. Again, it's a voluntary contribution, and without it, things would look a lot different. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to utilize some reserves. We have some specific reserves that have been bolstered over the last few years. For particular reasons, should they arise, that we are pretty confident now that are not going to arise, so we're going to use some reserves to help fill that budget gap. Now, similar to the COVID funding, you have to be careful. If you become too dependent on these reserves, you just rip the Band-Aid off, you're going to leave yourself with a big call kind of the funding cliff or the funding shelf. So what we've done is we've come up with sort of a 4 to 5 year plan, slightly reducing the amount of reserves that we're going to use year to year to soften that blow. So if you look at this, if you look at the total amount of reserves, you're probably looking at about $700,000 or so. It really correlates with the amount of money that, with the COVID funds that's going away, that allows us to retain that programming. But we're just sort of layering that in and slowly weaning ourselves off of that. Again, in the newsletter, you saw this. This is the three-part budget, if you will. This is a mandated reporting mechanism. We have to break down our budget into three components: program, administration, and capital. You'll see that capital is a decrease based on the buildings and grounds position that I spoke of, and some slight variations in our debt service. You can see total budget increase of 4.32%, and the tax levy increase, which is compliant at 4.0. I'm going to zip through these slides, and then we'll open up the floor for any questions or comments. Next week, on Tuesday, 12 to 8 in the bus garage. Come in to vote. The first proposition will be the budget. The second one will be for the purchase of 2 school vehicles, one 30-passenger small bus, the van, and then one suburban type vehicle. As we have more students that are attending programs outside the district, it's really important for us to have a diverse fleet. We have 70 passenger buses, we have mini vans, we have everything in between. Why do we have 70 passenger buses? People always ask the question. I've never seen a bus that's full. And I always ask them, well, where do you see the bus? On the way out or on the way back? What do you think of that? Are our buses full every day? No, they're not. 89% of our kids are involved in after-school programs. So, yeah, on any given day, no, our buses aren't full. But we have to be prepared for that day that we have to evacuate the grounds and have to have seats for everyone. When ski club goes, we have to have a 7-passenger bus. Okay? It allows us to have sports teams travel together. So again, having a diverse fleet is important. I don't even want to get into it tonight, but the electrification of school vehicles is coming. We've taken initial steps. We've had a fleet study conducted. We're going to be meeting with engineers. It's coming. Is it going to come as quickly as the state initially rolled out? Maybe not, but it's coming. We need to be prepared. But again, this is just one more step to sort of bridge that gap to get us there. And this is included in the budget. So the debt service associated with the purchase of these 2 vehicles, not to exceed $180,000, is included in the budget. So it's not in addition to. Maybe out of range. Chris, can you skip me ahead one? There you go. The last one, on behalf of our friends at the Hamilton Public Library, this is the public library tax levy. Again, this is in addition to the school, totally separate from the school levy. This is just them taking advantage of being able to put this on our ballot. So we have that on their behalf. And then lastly, we have our board seat election. We have one term, one 3-year term with 2 candidates. And tonight, after the meeting at 7 o'clock, we will have a meeting candidate session, in which Travis and Corey will be introducing themselves and answering some questions. So that's what you'll see on the ballot next Tuesday. We do have absentee voting and early voting that is ongoing now through the rest of the week. So the absentee and early ballots have to be received by the clerk's office by 5 o'clock next Tuesday. And then as far as eligibility to vote, the three criteria: if the U.S. citizen, 18 or older, and a resident within the district for at least 30 days prior to the vote. So I know that's a lot. For those that have been attending meetings that have provided feedback, most of this should have been a review. I want to thank the board. It's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort. Bill, the rest of the administrative team, all of our faculty and staff, community members were very vocal. We had a number of community meetings that we received a lot of feedback. So on behalf of all of us up here, I want to thank everybody that contributed. And with that, if there's any questions, clarification on anything, either procedural or nitty-gritty, I'll answer if I can. If it's related to the program, I might defer to Bill, or we may struggle a little bit, but yeah.
Related to the Proposition 2,
Yeah.
it's school bus and library building together. I can't say I don't decide.
No.
No,
Sure.
two totally separate propositions. So Proposition 2 is transportation, so that's strictly for the school vehicles. Proposition 3 is for the public library. So you'll have three propositions: budget, buses, library, and then the board seat election. You're welcome.
Obviously, I haven't been from the meetings.
That's okay.
That's all right.
You're the one that matters.
The library, though, the money is collected through the library fund through the school?
It does. It's still taxed through, you'll still get it through the Office of Real Property. Yep. Yep. But it'll come through the school, and then that money is turned over to the library. Yep.
So I want to make some statements for
Sure.
that. I'm sorry, I heard you had budget copies, which I did not see anywhere advertised for whatever reason, and this the opportunity to work with you on the budget. But I've been coming to budget meetings for a few years, and each year I feel as a citizen the way probably many citizens feel who are not here, because I've noticed year after year, fewer people come to hear you speak, although you do a terrific presentation, that really do, and you make everything sound like you need everything, and it's all justified. Probably is. But I wonder, when you're all working on the budget, you can think actually about perhaps the 60% of the community that don't have children in school and are struggling just to be able to pay that ride
this business of the board has done it, not in the supermarket, and while that can be very valuable at times, encourage people to come to our meetings, come to our budget talks, come.
I have also gone to school board meetings that are not in the past 8 years. I confess that. Because the school board meetings are not, felt very much to me like, you're not allowed to talk. And the phrase, this is a public meeting, it's not a meeting for the public. I've heard that. And if you can't speak and you have questions, you don't know. So that's another thing. It's the voice of the public talking to you.
Thank you.
Maybe next time there'll be more people here and shop. I'm really encouraged to see that the code students incorporated are junior students. I think that's excellent. And I would like to see people volunteers from, older people like me encouraged to come in and do some volunteer work. Like I can go to schools and demonstrate, play parts on the wheel, not that necessarily change the course of the student education, but I think there's a lot of volunteer potential out there. And one time when I offered to volunteer, I felt like, no. I didn't feel encouraged to come in like they seemed suspicious of me.
We would encourage you to come in and volunteer. There is a process, unfortunately, you have to go through New York State. If you come in and volunteer on a regular basis, you have to go through the fingerprinting process and the clearance process, which there's a fee involved, unfortunately, but New York State. But we'd love to have you in. Stop into the office, and we'll sit down, and I'll show you the application process, and we can have a conversation. You're welcome.
I want to bring you also the concern about, so the salary increase, let's say around 3%. That's how the market works. And also I would like to know what the special program is, because I've been trying to work with school. I know that some parents have to approach children because of concern of a lot of diversification. That's supposed to be 50 plus. So we don't have any plus. And I'm thinking, if you want to bring more people and the population is growing, how the school addresses diversity, how the school addresses sexuality, how the school addresses identity. I don't see anything. I don't think parents may have to those in the facility because of concern for non-binary students. So in that case, I don't want to say anything because as a person, the free person doing that, I'm concerned that I see set up. I don't see that, and I talk to work with students because I did a seminar and I work with some students and some of the parents must not from high school, not from high school, but from working, etc. And all of them say they don't have that outside. And I'm very appalled. We are removed in Hamilton bubble, and we can see that public education provides this needed. Because one of the things one of us was COVID, that now that they have channels to educate their kids. But what about others? What about kids who are not part of their program? What about kids who are from fewer areas? What about kids who do not have the same system of supporting homes? And that's why when they hear about the need for 180,000 for us, I'm not like, okay. But what about investment in that? When they come to the next step of college, they're not having a lot of acceptance because I see what the time focus and and I think the Hamilton is so good to disguise everything. So we are so polite, but we are not very diversified. We are not very well outside. So that's what very, very emotionally touches me when I hear about that. Because I wonder that my classes, my mind
just one point of clarification, when I speak from a budget perspective, of special programs, those are students with disabilities. So those are students who have been diagnosed with disabilities and need alternative placements or related services related to.
Well, it's not exactly that, because it's not, year.
Are there other questions?
Another question from that, your point. Sometimes, you know, you have to come to a budget meeting or board meeting, suffer a lot. I mean, you might get something later, you meeting back here or whatever, you know, every other month. The other thing is, I don't have to skip out of work half the time, to make that time to get there. The other is, the same thing with the budget coffee dates, or we seem to be in the middle of the day. I mean, it's summer, like 4 o'clock, but still, it's like,
And our budget coffee this year, Paul, one was late in the evening and one was in the morning. So we did that because we had
the
heard that.
one, we had, to me, the problem, yes, there's one, okay, and that has to be night I have, like, an board meeting, that meeting. I mean, there are, since it's a small community, we're involved in a lot of things. And say, well, we have one meeting, then, yeah, if I can hit it, fine, it's fine. But, I mean, to me, there's just not enough, what should I say, opportunity to participate. To your point, though, you gotta be great, but I've also known that watch budgets come and go. When was the last time a budget was turned down again? 1956, that was the one? I mean, it's just static through here. You know, the state kind of mandates allow what you do it, come to a board meeting. It's, you know, you go through a list of things, you guys already know what's going on there, it's mandated. You know, sure, all the things you do, you're not gonna change much. Participate. I mean, let's be real here. I mean, you guys are out, you got good people who are behind you. You know, I'm not saying good, bad, or different, it's just the way the system is managed. You know, and to say participate, yes, but you're just.
Well, this year,
I would say,
this year,
I'm gonna push back a little bit, Paul. I mean, I've been here 15 years. I've been through this process multiple times. This year, and looking at this slide in January looked a lot different than what it does now. And the reason why is because of public participation, because of emails, because of people attending meetings, because of feedback that we receive. And I say that truthfully. I know we have board members that have been on the board for a lengthy period of time. This changed dramatically over the course of 3 months, strictly based on emails, dozens of emails. We heard people, and this changed dramatically. So
we
I understand what you're saying.
also put a lot more effort in this year to make sure we notified the community that didn't have students in the district. We made sure we don't tend to put anything on Nextdoor Hamilton. We did put budget coffee information on Nextdoor Hamilton. We had more budget coffees. We made sure that we spread them out and made sure that there was a board meeting after, so we had 2. So I want you to know that we have heard that through the years, and this year was a year that we did a lot more, mostly because we.
But I'm not that word. You know, to me, when the goal midway weekly went away.
Well, that's the problem.
The easy way is like, you know, you get that one, you know, now there's this 5 different places you gotta go look, you know, and I know I can go online and look up, which I occasionally do, it's like, oh.
I mean, we did make sure that we posted them,
What's going on? I mean,
right.
It's easier to find, but harder to find because there's so many places to go.
Yeah. But we did make the effort, is what I wanted to say, is we've made sure we did that this
What
year.
I'm finding is the timing for me, that I'm thinking, as I said, like, this doesn't change. I'm a minority, and I understand that part. I'm older, so I don't want to burn next door neighbor or something, you know, and so, I mean, I'm planning to hopefully retire at the end of the year, so maybe I will have time to come to the board. I just, you know, to me, it's an advantage to the people attending the meetings and not, I know the public is getting involved because it always has, you know, so even when we had the earned meeting, we'll show up how the board works because school here, you know, is a big thing. So yes, there is interesting here, but I
I mean, where I work, you know, with health insurance keeps going through the roof. Unfortunately, we keep asking the employees to pay a little more. I mean, you know, type of thing, you know, try to cut things.
Thank
You guys don't have, you do, but you don't have to cut things because it's a tax basis. So, you know, there is no other school same size next door that, you know, that you could be. So it's a different animal to some degree. You know, I understand all the dynamics of your work. It's just, to me, I find it awkward because it's always, it seems to be the middle of the day or the late afternoon or whatever. So,
Okay.
you know.
Thank,
And to find it, you have to make it up to find it instead of being published in a paper every Thursday. Video post. I'm old, I'm in, you know, I haven't changed the times.
well, you'll get there, I know you will.
You know, I know you don't want to be talking about your
You can. We do have one other piece of business for the meeting before we move on to the Meet the Candidate night. Are there any other specific questions for Matt at this time before we wrap and move to the next part of the meeting? Quick question?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to that other slide, because when you first bring it up, you tell me about additional students who go to out-of-district placement. Why does that happen, and what is that all about?
Through the process.
Hey, Matt, can you repeat the question for the people that are online?
Yes. So the question was, when we talk about students that are going out to an alternative placement, why does that happen? Yes. So these are students that have gone through a process, through an evaluative process, through the Committee on Special Education. And they've been diagnosed with a disability, and frankly, we are not capable of educating that student in this building. And there are alternative programs elsewhere that are better suited to educate these children. So we are placing these students in programs that are best suited for the needs that have been identified through the committee.
Thank you.
Yes.
And just one other suggestion, occurred to me when the other person was talking about how he's not in touch. I also feel that email, although it's annoying for everyone, seems to be really cheap. And announcements can be sent to an email list if people offer their emails in the community, and we would all be informed.
Great idea. Thank you.
I can deny right now.
We'll get it after. At this time, if everybody's okay, are there any other questions at the moment? At this time, we will be taking a short break for an executive session. Then we will adjourn the meeting and we'll move into the Meet the Candidate night. So at this time, I need a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss matters regarding the proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll move to the think tank, and we'll be right back.